guys, and welcome to part 1 to What If Naruto died in the wave and went back in time and became a female. This is what if you guys have chosen for this week, so I do hope you guys enjoy this. Also, if I sound a bit different, I do have a new mic, so hopefully somewhat sound quality is better. Hopefully, I don't know. So yeah, anyway, let's get on with this. So now to jerk forward his eyes would snap open as it sort of pan and yeah, so I say, thank Kami, it was just a dream that Beo, as he'd sort of kind of gaze somewhat down, and his hands would somewhat be kind of shaking as he'd be somewhat covered in a cold sweat from just the somewhat nightmare as he thought he'd just died. And yeah, and after taking a few somewhat drafts to kind of calm himself or sort of step down, he'd realise my hair and my voice. I sound like a girl, but well, you somewhat gulp as he'd somewhat put his hand down between his legs and go, it's good. And gone, I'm actually girl that Beo. I'm actually, wait, hang on, it could just be right. Damn it, I've woken up a few times as some girl. I could have just transformed in my sleep. Yeah, that's probably just it. He'd somewhat kind of lift up his hand slightly shakily now and would go, release. But nothing could happen, and he'd try that 2 more times. And he'd then pinch himself and somewhat slightly pinch from that, and he'd realise that he was a girl. He was actually a girl, which then meant he did actually die. And with that realisation, it'd go, damn it, why did I have to listen to sense? Why did I have to run? If I didn't have run, I wouldn't have died. Surely Sasuke and Sakura could have come up with something to save Sensei, surely. But damn it, that's Beo. And but yeah, but at least I guess I get a second chance. So, but this time, yeah, somewhat not going to listen to Sensei. If I wind up with Sasuke and Sakura again, and Kakashi as somewhat as Sensei again, then I'm not going to listen to him when he says, tells us to run. I'm not going to stand. I'm going to try and fight him. And well, I get something else I can do as well is somewhat take shinobi life somewhat a lot more seriously. I thought I somewhat wars, but I guess I could have done a lot more. I could have gone out, actually bought weights and trained with them, gotten even stronger. And now that I'm girl, I'm definitely gonna have to do that because I'm probably even weaker than I was before. And yeah, I'm probably gonna have to even somewhat train in chakra control, so that's a lot better. But yeah, so, but it depends on how old I am. I don't seem to have breasts, so I'm like at least, I don't know, 9, 10 years old, maybe I'm 11, maybe I'm 12, and I'm what was that again? Oh right, late bloomer. Yeah, so not in. Just have to should push herself. Should sort of get up, and would sort of walk over to sort of the full body mirror to kind of check herself out, and she realised that she looked relatively the kind of same besides some sort of her hair going down to her mid back, but also had been a lot more blonde than yellow. And yeah, though from there, she would, from there she'd walk over to somewhere where her calendar was and would sort of realise that she was 10 years old. It was her birthday, October 10th, and yeah, she was 10 years old. Today was her birthday, and yeah, and so from there, she'd sort of look over, around the room to, see ramen cups and whatever thrown about the place, and guess that's something else I could probably do, or at least somewhat once I get dressed, is probably something, clean up, and then well, yeah, maybe then go out and buy some even maybe go to the library, see if they have anything about chakra control and that. Yeah, so from there she'd go to the sort of bathroom, and we'd kind of sit there going to the toilet and starting to sort of think about what she's going to train in, sort of maybe trying to learn how to kind of manipulate water, or maybe trying something else. And yeah, so after after maybe a minute or two, she would get up and would go back to her room after, of course, washing her hands and that, and yeah, from there she would from there she'd get dressed, and she'd put all her clothes, so her trousers, panties, and top. So she'd put them kind of away from, or at least she'd put them where he kind of put his nightwear. Somewhat, or at least we'd just put them on the bed for right now. She'd go over to her somewhat closet and would open it up to just see just see her voice, and go, well, I guess that is another thing I could also do, is actually maybe get like some darker clothing, since they did say it's fine, and or Kakashi sense did say it was fine, or to wear onto the village, and yeah, I guess because I've got like the Armbu and other Jonin and that protecting the village and all, but some outside outside of the village, I guess I should have bought darker clothing, because then maybe I could have actually stood maybe a chance of getting away from someone with no brows, and yeah. Though after looking somewhat for a bit, we'd pull out a pair of panties, we'd put them on, we'd then somewhat pull out something like tights, or somewhat pantyhose, but also kind of trouser blank, though they'd be somewhat form fitting, so they'd hug her legs, and as they'd go down to some of her feet, some of her feet would kind of slide somewhat into them, hooking with somewhat, it kind of hooking down somewhat and around her, somewhat for a heel, somewhat to loop someone down or come. And yeah, from there she'd go and she'd somewhat would see somewhat an orange, similarly somewhat fairly skirt, an orange kind of pencil skirt, or more similarly just somewhat a bit more similarly slightly restrictive skirt. But deciding for right now not to kind of those as still like the thought of actually being a female rape girl now was still relatively somewhat new, and a bit of adjustment had to sort of have to adjust. And yeah, so instead would decide not to obviously go with trousers, because it'd mean pulling off the ones she just pulled on. We'd see a short shorts, and we'd decide to put them on, so somewhat orange, so orange shorts. We'd put them on, and then we'd sort of look over and we'd just decide to throw in a sort of black top and a then orange jacket, and yeah, those who decided to look through her clothes even more, and we didn't really just see, it was like maybe like a frilly skirt, a some pencil skirt or that, then pretty much just like maybe one or two pair, well, just a single pair of shorts, and then from there it was just orange trousers, and just orange, some orange trousers, like at least 6 or 7, maybe even 8 or 10 pairs of orange trousers, and somewhat the same amount in jackets, and yeah. And of course, somewhat, the only tops you'd own would be black or simply white. And yeah, I definitely need to get some different clothing that's for Sword Databeo. And yeah, though just as you're about to close up closet should go, I may get, maybe this me got some different shoes as well. Though something else you would also see was a blue dress that almost seemed to or at least somewhat not to realise that it would, or at least somewhat remember, or at least it would simply go well with her some blue eyes. Yeah, and would somewhat wonder why she bought that, because she could tell almost immediately it would be too big for her, a bit too large, as well. Yeah, and you couldn't really figure why she'd buy something like that, seemingly. But anyway, though, someone looking down, she'd see just a pair of somewhat blue, stiletto, like somewhat high heels, just 1 inch high heels, and the blue would be the same colour as Shinobi or Konrichi's sandals. So yeah, and someone would go, well, I did say I wasn't going to, I was going to take it more seriously, but well, couldn't really hurt to wear them. Plus, you would somewhat think about maybe wearing them or just going off and wearing the Shinobi sandals, or at least Konrichi sandals. But after a few seconds of debating, we would just go screw it, and we'd just slide our feet into it. Somewhat would find that they would indeed fit, and after a bit of somewhat unease of somewhat wearing them, would get a slight somewhat control somewhat of them. And yeah, so from there we'd somewhat look around our room and would go, well, it's time to clean this up, and would do so about 5 to say 8 minutes later. Room would be clean. From there she'd go into going down the short corridor. She'd go and clean up the kitchen and that of just the ramen bowls and cups and that, and so I should or at least somewhat remember. I guess I should also maybe actually get some proper food, not just rely on eating ramen all the time, as it is nice and all. Yeah, I guess I should somewhat what Sensei said, I should probably eat a more balanced diet. Maybe then I'd be, somewhat a lot taller, and if I'm going to train, maybe it will help me to get stronger, and, but yeah, somewhat taller. And maybe it would even help with, well, slight, or at least a slight blush. I think about it. Maybe I'd get a bigger, chest as well. But anyway, yeah. Though from there, someone would spend another, or at least 10-15 minutes cleaning up a kitchen / living room, and, and of course throw out sort of all of that. And something else she would also do would kind of throw out just the 10 pairs of orange trousers and jackets. So she'd keep 2 pairs, somewhat of both, one main, one backup type deal. But just, there was just no need for all that, somewhat orange. She kind of felt and that, she may have gone a bit overboard with the orange, definitely. But, from there, she'd keep these somewhat dress as, she figured, she'd just grow into it, and, And so from there, and from, because somewhat, and she realised, somewhat, all that walked around, she kind of had forgotten she was even wearing heels, and would only somewhat would only pop into her mind when she'd, kind of, somewhat had a few seconds, or at least somewhat a few seconds of rest. And, mainly as, anyway, though, she sort of realised that partway through cleaning up the kitchen / living room, the hill seemed to just go silent. It would go from the kind of somewhat rhythmic clicking from walking in high heel stiletto high heels to just being dead silent. And she sort of realised that maybe she could be a Konrichi wearing high heels if she could figure out somewhat how to kind of control that kind of clicking, if somewhat, or at least how to simply do that, though kind of consciously instead of unconsciously, as though she'd kind of to somewhat go at least over to a kind of kitchen area and would somewhat go looking through sort of stuff, and the only thing she'd kind of had would be somewhat just kind of cups of ramen, and or at least would manage to, or at least somewhat the somewhat, or at least kind of somewhat some toast and that, and though I should just finish that up, and would get up, would go over to a sink and would proceed to wash and dry them, put them away, and just as she'd put them away, she'd hear a knock at the door. Being confused, she'd kind of wonder who it was, because she'd sort of remember from her past life, or at least you'd sort of remember that the old man never really, or at least they, Naruto had done, mainly rolled out the something Hiruzen as sure, okay, come around maybe somewhat once maybe once a month to give the the somewhat the orphan money, or that somewhat that, but kind of that was it. He never really came around during his birthday, and if they saw one of us, or on his birthday, he'd wish him a happy birthday and that. But maybe Nabu would stop by to give him something from his and all that, but kind of that was it. And so would being, and couldn't really think it was Iruka Sensei, is how Iruka hadn't really kind of really started paying really kind of a lot of attention to Naruto, not until about after he actually became a shinobi. And after that, after the after the Mizuki incident, I hadn't really been paying attention to Naruto. So she'd go over, she'd somewhat go to the door and would open it and go Gigi, Naruto-chan, how are you? I'm fine, though. Why are you here? At least have you forgotten it's your birthday today, and well, happy birthday. Thanks. Thanks. He'd somewhat smile and he'd go, something here coming up. Sure. He'd somewhat he would enter and and so as he enter, he would take a kind of better glance at someone now and should go, so you sort of like having that dress, so I got you sort of last year, but only someone kind of remembering that dress would go, well, it's a bit big, somewhat old man. I'm not going to, randomly start, growing a chest, today or anything like that. And here's a sort of chuckle and go, I know. And yeah, though I just couldn't help but, kind of get it. It's, somewhat kind of, look, somewhat, as I told you, sort when I gave it to you, that, likewise it may be big once or someone once, old enough and that. It would look beautiful on you. Should someone have a pleasant thanks. And though I do see, you're at least going something, buying something, different. So, that your general, sort of orange jacket and trousers. Just go, well, and you're even, wearing some tiny heels. I don't think, somewhat. Maybe, I think I only ever saw you those something once when I first kind of got them with you a year ago, though they were granted a bit a size big. And so someone just nodded, and it kind of made sense to, someone Naruto that all is now that it was the old man, and that, well, the orange, just the orange, all is so much stuff. It would make sense why. Well, yeah. Anyway, though from there, though, sort of go, and I've, see you've somewhat, cleaned up. I've spent about 20 minutes or so, cleaning up. I even kind of cleaned up my room. And so I just nod. And they would, go. They would sort of sit down, and they would kind of somewhat. I just would go. They would kind of have to somewhat ask me something. Gigi, and what's that? Naruto, speak your mind. Well, you see, a few days ago, I kind of saw a somewhat Jonine kind of similarly using water. Using water? Kind of a bit confused. Well, I'm being like, you kind of made it float. And, water manipulation. Elemental ninjutsu. What now? Well, somewhat elemental ninjutsu, in other words. And so just go, okay, somewhat, could you teach me that? Well, no, plus no, plus, you're somewhat not really out there, can you? But, Sasuke can use, fire, or, can, manipulate fire, all that. Yes, but, you can't just, say he's from a clan, his clan's dead, isn't it? Well, yeah, but come on, you said you somewhat not going to, somewhat play favourites or something like that, but it seems like you kind of are, letting Sasuke, somewhat letting Sasuke, train and learn, somewhat fire, ninjutsu, but not allowing me to learn anything like that. It would kind of somewhat and he was going to go, fine, I still won't teach you, but I can allow you to at least go to the library and somewhat somewhat request from there what element to learn. What element? Huh? Right, of course you wouldn't know. Well, you see there are 5 elements. Those, I somewhat know, water and fire. There of course 3 others that had been wind, earth and lightning. And somewhat explain how they're strong, how each one is stronger than and weaker than, one another. And that, everyone's kind of born with, an affinity towards a single element, maybe sometimes two or even three. And yeah, from there, at least would go out, should kind of sort of get out and go out, then, so, old man, and, and someone would start smiling and go, okay, something like, hey, something, now I'm, something, I'm kind of an older man. So just someone, kind of roll her eyes. Yeah. GG. Whatever you say. You just someone, he'd allow a chuckle. And they would, go, should, leave, should somewhat lock up. And would go to the, they would go to the library. And yeah, from there, he's making a library account for Naruto, and also would tell the librarian to, or someone allow Naruto kind of access to the elemental manipulation, or at least to have a Ambu go there to go get whatever one she kind of wants, but only the manipulation and learning to control the element. The minion would not go anything else. Chakra control should sort of say, and he was going to go, yes, that's kind of also important, yes, that as well. Should someone would kind of nod, and yeah. From there, they would somewhat leave, and they would somewhat kind of walk around, for a bit, eventually winding up at somewhat Ichiraku Ramen, and it being, seemingly midday now. And yeah, somewhat after having lunch with one another, Houston would kind of somewhat tell, someone goodbye that, be that he can't really spend any, more time somewhat with her, as, the paperwork, got to be, piling up at this point, and if I don't get back and start doing it, I'm going to be there, somewhat all night long. She'd sort of nod, and she'd go and give him a cuddle, and just go, somewhat, thanks for, at least spending half the day with me. He was just smile and would kind of rub her hair, no problem, and kind of, here, and, I couldn't really think about anything to give you, so I decided instead, or at least more so my aunt kind of told me that, I should just kind of give you the money that you're starting to get to the age and where it'd probably be best to just give you some, some money or all that, instead of trying to maybe buy something. And yeah, she'd sort of nod, and she'd kind of sort of thank him. And yeah, from there, they would, would leave, and she'd just decide to walk around Konoha to kind of get her bearings about, well, at least, Konoha, and potentially if anything was different, which she'd find that nothing was different, everything was the exact same as her Konoha, and that the only thing that seemed to be different was her literally just being female. And yeah, though she would, or at least in nothing, she'd kind of realise that she didn't see, or at least she seemed to forgot to bring out, a kind of parcel wallet. Yeah, so, or at least though deciding to something go back home, she'd put up, or at least she'd, would somewhat see, the, handbag there, and somewhat appearing, or at least somewhat kind of, somewhat unzipping it, would perceive to see, just some orange, at least somewhat orange, handbag, inside of it being a kind of somewhat burnt, or kind of burnt orange, somewhat pass, and somewhat opening, and would somewhat wonder where, Garma-chan was, but kind of realise that, somewhat most gals and, somewhat women kind of have a, handbag or, purse that. And yeah, so, yeah, anyway, they would put money in there and would also count how much you had, as you could then, try and, think about what clothes to potentially get, or that. And yeah, those you would notice time and would go and would start, or at least would kind of have a few bowls, or at least a few somewhat cups of ramen before just somewhat kind of rinsing them out and throwing them away. And once she's finished eating them, we'd just go have a bath. And yeah, and the next day she'd go and she'd somewhat one, or at least she'd go to the same shop or at least somebody he went to somebody in his life, where you'd go to get his clothes, as it'd be the only place that seemed to kind of actually give him the price that it stated on the sort of the tag, and not kind of charge up for some stupid tax or that. And yeah, so someone entering, should kind of, at least what should be around today. Then, should someone decide to, at least go with the sort of fairly, sort of orange skirt. So it'd be, and someone she's somewhat fanned, would be somewhat in the drawer next to her some panties were similarly kind of, or at least what just somewhat looked to be too small kind of stuff. And she's initially somewhat confused, but kind of realised that after kind of yanking on them that they could stretch quite far, and realised that. And yeah, and somewhat tights. Anyway, so we would somewhat get well, yeah. So we decide those on the high heel, the stilettos again, and just an orange jacket, obviously. And yeah, anyway, that I should go. Some person go, so Naruto-chan, I see someone you wearing the skirt and someone heels. Never really thought you'd have to wear something like that. Just go, kind of thought maybe it was about time I started maybe taking or at least maybe trying some different stuff. She'd just somewhat nod, and yeah, from there she'd something go, and she'd go, she'd buy, she'd decide, she'd go and she'd buy a few different some clothes and that, and eventually she'd go over to some of the shoe section, to which she'd try or at least find maybe some more heels somewhat like this, but maybe in a different colour or that. But much to her surprise, the only similarly shoes they had in a size were all flat, not high heeled, and that the high heeled were, or at least the ones with a heel, were about a few sizes bigger than our current feet. So yeah, though from there she'd buy those, would go back home, drop them off, would then make her way to a somewhat shinobi shop, the one she'd, or at least someone had been introduced to, or at least he'd been introduced to, Heroes and I'd introduced Naruto to. And yeah, going in there, the person would greet her just like the shop, just like the clothes shop keeper, and somewhat somewhat greeting her. And yeah, though from that, or at least though she'd somewhat ask if he had any sort of weights, towards which she'd go, oh, you're finally gonna start some training, getting some muscle. She'd go, yeah, somewhat, and I may have said that I'm going, I'm taking being a Conrichi seriously a lot, but I kind of realised from my nightmare that's it, that I may want to truly start taking it really seriously and training, with weights and that. To which she'd sort of nod. And, well, yeah, after getting some weights and that, she'd go drop them off again back at home, and would go somewhere to a shop, a food shop, and would get some other, food and that, to which the owner would, or at least the, cashier / owner would, try and, mark up, for all the money, to which she'd know that it shouldn't be, that expensive, and after a few choice rides back and forward, she'd end up yelling out for some, some ambu, to which would appear within a few seconds. That's what was wrong, and would simply point to the cashier and state that he was trying to, overcharge her. So instead look at him, or at least, would someone look at her, sounded something cute, or at least she'd someone go, aye. And after a few choice words from some of the Ambu themselves, perceived to, kind of, or at least somewhat, would perceive to say the correct amount of, something, money that it should, be, and after, would pay that, would take, would take the food and would, go, and, after something like that, and of course putting it away, and then putting her clothes and that away, she'd go over to the library, and would, from there, would, or at least the sort of librarian would kind of, greet her in a slight monotone voice, as, someone she wouldn't be thrilled to see, someone to her, the 9 times and so beautiful things. But, well, though she didn't exactly hate her, nor did she like her, it was just neutral. And, the best way to come across as neutral was, in her mind, to just be monotone, so that's how. And so from there, or at least now to ask, or at least I'd kind of been thinking from yesterday, which, element would kind of be the best against, no brows, and she'd wound up with kind of going with lightning as, somewhat, of course, those, not, somewhat, that water conducts, lightning, or electricity, lightning, and, and so, I should ask for, lightning manipulation, or at least would ask for some lightning, and also maybe chakra control, to which or at least should someone nods, should tell us that, the arm would, go get it. A few moments later would come back, and would give it to the, not to the cashier, to the librarian, to start to be kind of confused and go, huh? She'd go, well, or at least, she'd see kind of Naruto's confused, so look on her face, and she'd go, it's somewhat, as this librarian, or you, well, so yes, you can, read them here, though as you're, an academy student, you can take them home, though the only thing, or at least though being a librarian, or you can take them home, though for a, limited amount of time. Though the one thing, though, is that if they are damaged or that, you will have to you will have to pay to replace them. Got that? Hi. And so from there, or at least a few seconds, about a few seconds to a minute later, she would give both the scrolls, to Naruto, and would tell her that they, to return them within about a month. So someone would nod and would go somewhat home, and from there, she'd kind of figured that she should probably learn, the chakra control first before moving on to kind of, trying to produce lightning and that. And so, from there, she'd, or at least somewhat from there, she'd open up the first, the chakra control exercise, to which the first chakra control exercise would be tree walking. And reading that, she'd think about, changing her shoes over to the, shinobi sound, can't reach sandals, but would kind of shrug, and would end up go and someone would leave her home with the, well, it's, I don't know, someone leave the scroll home, though had read that kind of a few times. And yeah, so and from there, about 5 or so days, I'd say about 4 to 5 days later, she'd get that down. So going back to the scroll, or at least, well, no, so waking up and someone, though getting dressed, or at least though, well, yeah, someone as she'd open it to learn what level 2 was, she'd realise that she'd have to go back to the clothes shop to get a kind of swimsuit. So as she would be getting wet, as it'd be, water walking, and from there, she'd get, and about half the day later, she'd be able to do so, and from there going back, and thankfully, all this someone kind of realised that she could just easily dry herself by just sending, chakra instead of just, to her legs, but throughout her entire body, and we just, pulse her chakra to which would just, fling the water off of her. And yeah, drying her, and yeah. And so, yeah, from there, she'd look at the chakra control scroll again, and it would have one more exercise, which would be kunai balancing, and it'd state that once you can, balance one kunai, to just, try another one on top of that, and on top of that, and that. If, someone wanted to, learn even more chakra control, to go and ask a medic and all that, and yeah. Though, she'd kind of think about that, and she'd sort of think, and she'd, well, I don't exactly want to become a medic nin, but, well, maybe if I asked them, they would teach me, or at least their chakra control, or, well, I guess it wouldn't actually hurt to learn, how to kind of heal. I do have all this, a lot more chakra than, Sasuke and Sakura, and if they were to, get hurt whilst I may be able to heal, kind of quickly, they don't, so I guess I could, heal them and all, and plus do kind of have the 9 tails in me. Do I? Kind of realising that she wasn't exactly sure if she was the 9 tails Shinchoku or not, she would, someone would, reveal her stomach and send in, mold in, some chakra, the seal would show itself, the 8 trigram, tetragram seal would show itself, and she just let a silence, sigh, and go, I guess that's, yeah. Anyway, and, but yeah, from there, she would, she'd somewhat would, or she'd sign that, clean-up balance wasn't potentially going to give it all that much more chakra control. She'd look over to, she'd open up, well, she'd actually go back to the library, returning the chakra control scroll, and yeah, she'd sort of realising that, or at least that the, like manipulation probably, was going to take her a lot longer than a month to get down, and she'd sort of realise that it may be smart to maybe, copy the scroll, copy it down, word for word in a different, in a blank scroll. So she had a copy of the scroll from the library, and with that thought, she would go, buy a empty scroll, go and then write down, somewhat, the kind of steps from how to, produce, how to create lightning chakra to, how to, or at least from level, or at least, well, yeah, that, and then also how to, avoid kind of, getting, electric shock, and that once you, don't shock yourself with your own lightning, then, level 1, and then level 2, lightning manipulation. With that down, she would return the lightning scroll, and the, or at least the, person, the heroine go, something that was kind of, fast to learn in a week, and, or at least by end, roughly a week. I'd go, well, I kind of just wrote it, and copied it down in a scroll, and she'd go, So I see that that does make a lot more sense. And yeah, though feel free, to come back here, and to request, something, think again. I probably, will, and from there should return, and should start, learning how to produce lightning. And with that, I'm going to end this part here, guys. So if you have enjoyed this part, do tell me in the comments down below. And yeah, hope you guys have a good day or night, depending on wherever you are and whenever you watch this. And good bye.